So truth be told, I went into Kraven the Hunter with incredibly low expectations, especially after Sony's recent Spider-Man-less Spider-Man universe movies haven't really been that great, namely Venom the Last Dance, Morbius, and of course, who can forget Madam Web. But to my surprise, honestly, Kraven the Hunter is such a wicked movie and just packs such a punch. I mean, everybody is quite literally putting their best foot forward, and I think the fact that it's based on a villainous character, they can go so dark and just do things that typical heroes would never do. And it really does put a lens on toxic masculinity and how this can be so awful in terms of raising guys. I also love the theory that everybody kind of has an animal inside of them, and this movie really does bring out people's animalistic characteristics. And a number of different characters from all of the different factions have got a lot of determination, and I think when all of this just butts head in such a crazy clashing kind of way, you really do see the impact of who is really going to end up on top. And on that point, I do think the twist right at the end with Russell Crowe's character, they could have just done so much more with that, as well as the final fight. I mean, there was so much build up, and it just ended up, unfortunately, just being such a big CGI fest. So firstly, you don't really believe it, and then it's just over way too quickly, so it's just really disappointing. But outside of those two things in the final couple of moments in this movie, I do think everything else surrounding it is actually pretty wicked. I mean, it's incredibly thrilling. There was just one action sequence after another, and like I said, because of the fact that it's based on a villainous character who I guess you could say is a bit of an anti-hero in this movie, and he doesn't have any line that he won't cross, it's just so unpredictable what this character will do as well as what he's capable of. And then on top of that, his power moveset in terms of taking on the powers of any animal that he wants, I think is pretty awesome. And it's got some really cool moments. For example, young Dimitri screaming to Russell Crowe's character that it should have been you instead of the legendary lion. His unstoppable desire to get into that cab I thought was absolutely wicked too. The way in which he was trying to grab the plane, very reminiscent to how Captain America. Chris Evans did that. I loved the stealth sequence where Kraven is pretty much behind all of these characters, but they would never know it. And his relationship with all of the animals, even though the animals weren't replying back to him, you could really feel it. And so I feel like you really are emotionally connected to this character. And I do actually think Aaron Taylor-Johnson nailed this role. He's did such a good job as both Sergei and Kraven. And I feel like, you know, you can't deny the fact that he looks incredible in this movie. And he just carries it really, really well. Like I said, he's got both a really nice heart as well as an unstoppable desire in terms of getting what he wants. And he's just such a brute force. So you can really feel his strength throughout this film. I feel like Russell Crowe once again did a really formidable performance as Nikolai. I mean, he's a typical man's man, and like I said, you can really see all of the negative, toxic characteristics and consequences of thinking like this, as well as raising kids like this. He's really ruthless as well. Of course, he doesn't have Kraven's powers, but imagine if he did, he would be unstoppable. And I think it's interesting as he has had this desire to want to be a legend his entire life and wants to wipe out all of the other animal legends, and there is literally no line that he won't cross, and even his family members are kind of disposable in terms of his desire to get whatever he wants. And I feel like this really does come back to haunt him and bite him quite literally right at the end. Ariana DeBose was also really, really great as Calypso. Like I said, everybody did a really, really good job in this movie. I love the partnership between her and Kraven. I feel like there's a lot of chemistry between Ariana DeBose and Aaron Taylor-Johnson, and I feel like a lot of love interest in movies these days, you can't actually believe it as the chemistry isn't always there. And I love the fact that she's balancing both her voodoo priestess background as well as having a really successful career too. We've then got Fred Hechinger from the first season of The White Lotus playing Dimitri. I liked this character in terms of him being really weak, in terms of him just being able to play anybody, so it really does foreshadow his eventual turn into becoming the chameleon. I just feel like it was a little bit unrealistic that Russell Crowe's Nikolai character wouldn't try and mold him a little bit more like Kraven. And he was just nothing like his younger counterpart. I mean, Kraven's younger counterpart, you could kind of see that character turning into Kraven, but I just feel like you couldn't really see that with Dimitri. I thought Christopher Abbott's character of the foreigner, I mean, he has a lot of presence, and I feel like his power is incredibly deadly, and he pretty much does wipe out Kraven. But I just feel like from a portrayal perspective, he just lacked so much depth And if he is going to be positioned as one of those characters like the Winter Soldier and kind of coming in every now and again and really slowing certain characters down and not being afraid to kill off certain characters, I feel like they could have just done so much more with this guy. I mean, when he does finally face Kraven, obviously it is a cool fight, but because of the fact that you haven't really seen much development with this character, it just felt a little bit flat. We've then got Alessandro Nivola playing the Rhino, and even though he definitely has got some cringe lines, and even though the final act of this movie was pretty awful in terms of it being incredibly rushed and a true CGI mess, I do feel like you can really see how determined this guy is in terms of wanting to wipe off all of the Kravenov family so that he can have the title and he can kind of become his own legend. I feel like a lot of characters in that demographic are just incredibly toxic. And I feel like prior to the final couple of moments, actually his ability to tap into the Rhino's powers and it kind of also being the thing that is really weakening him, I think was interestingly explored, whereas with Kraven, his powers are just adding to his super awesomeness. So, you know, sure, Kraven the Hunter could have been a little bit better, but I really believed all of the underworld dark things that are taking place. I love the little nod that Kraven is afraid of spiders. I thought that was a really nice foreshadowing of his eventual meet with Spider-Man. And I was just really hooked and invested with certain characters in this movie, and I just wish that they would have continued it, as obviously we don't really know what's going to happen now, as Sony have kind of said that they're pausing their live action world in terms of just focusing now on Spider-Man 4, Spider-Man Noir, and of course Beyond the Spider-Verse. I'm guessing Kevin Feige has asked them to do this as they just want to pause everything so that they can just focus on Beyond the Spider-Verse and then of course Avengers Secret Wars. And maybe Aaron Taylor-Johnson will reprise his role of Quicksilver. But nonetheless, I would love to see him back as Kraven one day in the future. As like I said, all of these characters and this world/universe was really interesting. And so for all of those reasons, I'm going to give Kraven the Hunter a solid 7.5 out of 10. Now I'd love to hear from you. What did you think of Kraven the Hunter? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.